Buddy, you're a team on the rise, sharing knowledge every day, preserving wisdom in the cloud, never letting it fade away. You got insights on your mind, big plans for the crew. Sensay's gonna capture it all someday. We will, Sensay you. We will, Sensay you. Buddy, you're a new hire, feeling lost, asking questions in the hall. Chatbots got the answers now, lifting you up tall. You got handovers in your hand, fast ramp up coming through. Sensay's gonna empower you someday. We will, Sensay you. We will, Sensay you. We will, Sensay you. We will, Sensay you. Feel the peace, the joy, the fall. One more loss, just growth, we know. Buddy, you're a leader, saving costs, boosting efficiency high. Knowledge base is locked and secure under the endless sky. You got the world in your grasp, the emotions running true. Sensei's adding value all someday.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2026 Community Call. For those who don't know me, I'm Dan Thompson, the founder and CEO of Sensay. Sensay specializes in capturing tacit knowledge from leaving or departing employees to help pass that knowledge on to new employees using advanced voice-to-voice AI and home-built RAG systems. It's always one of the highlights of my job to get to talk directly to the community. So please do enjoy the conversation for the next 20, 30 minutes and ask any questions you like on any of the channels, and we'll get to them. I'm going to start with some updates, but do feel free to ask throughout the call to post questions on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and we will see them and address as many as possible at the end. Unfortunately, there are no rewards for the questions today, but we do have some other goodies coming up. I want to start with a moment from Web Summit in Vancouver this week. I was standing in line for a coffee on day 2 and got chatting with the founder of a small manufacturing business. It was really, really specialized work, the kind of thing where the knowledge sits in 2 or 3 people's hands. He told me his lead operator, a man who had been with the company for 31 years, was retiring in 6 weeks. And he said, almost a throwaway line. He said, I genuinely don't know what we're going to do. Half of what he knows isn't written down anywhere. I think we might actually have to turn down contracts. That's 31 years of expertise about to walk out the door. And the best plan they had was hoping for the best. That conversation, really resonated with me throughout and stayed with me the whole conference. That's not even an edge case. That's happening in tens of thousands of businesses right now, every single week, and it's exactly the problem we're building Sensay to solve. So that's the energy I came back home with after the conference, and it's the energy I want to share with you today. So let's get into it. Web Summit itself was genuinely validating. I walked booth after booth, speaking to teams, trying to crack different pieces of the tacit knowledge puzzle, everything from customer support, sales playbooks, engineering documentation, different angles, different verticals. The market is finally waking up to what we've been building towards from day one. We are absolutely on the right path here, and I'd actually argue that we're further down than most of the teams that I met there. The second big signal recently came from Y Combinator. They recently published a request for companies, a list of the problems they most want to fund. And on that list, they put out a call for teams building what they're calling company brains. YC, with their pick of any problem in the world, decided that capturing institutional knowledge is one of the most important opportunities of this decade. When YC writes their RFCs, you know the pain is real, and you know capital is going to start flowing towards solutions. We have the product, the customers, and the technology already in place. So when that wave hits, We're not scrambling to catch it, we're already riding it. Now let me zoom out on the macro picture right now. Two enormous forces are converging. First, we're in the middle of one of the largest waves of corporate layoffs in recent memory. Tech, finance, media, retail, every single week, another big name announces huge cuts. Second, the boomer retirement wave is hitting full force. Millions of people with decades of experience are leaving the workforce, often with no real successor or succession plan. Most companies handle this with a 2-week notice period and a hastily written handover document. That's pretty much the system everywhere. And that comes from both sides. It's the company, but also the individual's willingness to participate in handovers. And it's catastrophically broken. Layered on top of all this is something that I think is the most important strategic shift we're seeing. A lot of these layoffs aren't just cost cutting. They're happening because AI is moving in to take over certain roles. The AI is coming to replace a role that still needs to learn the job. It still needs the context, the judgment, the nuance, the human built up over years. Sensay is perfectly poised to become the layer that actually captures the human knowledge and transfers it directly into the AI that's coming in to do the work. We're becoming the training data pipeline for the AI workforce. That's a much bigger market than we originally framed for ourselves, and we're actively building towards it. Let me give you a concrete example here of what that looks like in practice. We had a customer recently, a mid-sized operations team, using Sensay to capture knowledge from a senior team member who was leaving after more than a decade. Standard offboarding scenario on paper, but here's the part that was interesting. Weeks after the interviews were complete and the person had left, usage of that knowledge base kept climbing. The team was still going to it, asking questions, pulling up context for decisions, referencing old projects that they hadn't seen, that they hadn't worked on. That's the moment Sensay stops being an offboarding tool and starts becoming an everyday operating system for the team. And we're seeing this pattern repeat over and over with different customers. Customer token usage is way up. And what that tells us is that customers aren't just running the interviews and moving on. They're actually interacting with the knowledge bases every single day. The product is getting stickier and the value compounds the longer it's in place. On the product side, the team has shipped a tremendous amount over the last few weeks. A wave of bug fixes and refinements has made the system noticeably smoother. Interview flows are tighter, chatbot responses are sharper, and the integrations feel much more polished. If you haven't logged in lately, take another look. The experience is meaningfully better than it was even a month ago. A huge credit to the engineering team on this. And on the competitive front, I want to highlight 2 areas where we genuinely stand apart. The first is our advanced voice-to-voice interviews. Most of the competitors I saw at Web Summit are still relying on text-based forms or rudimentary recordings. Our voice experience captures nuance, tone, and the natural flow of how people actually explain what they do. And that translates directly into higher quality knowledge bases. The second is deployment. We meet teams where they already work, Slack, Teams, rather than forcing them into yet another tool. Those 2 things together are a real moat. We're not stopping at offboarding either. We're actually developing new use cases that meaningfully expand the addressable market. The first is temporary knowledge handovers, maternity leave, long sabbaticals, extended holidays, so teams don't lose momentum when someone steps away. The second is what we're describing as a second brain for current employees, capturing contemporary knowledge in real time. And the third, the one I'm most personally excited about, is business rescue. Millions of small and mid-sized businesses are owned by people in their 60s and 70s looking to retire with no clear successor and no obvious route to sell the business and move on. And they're just at real risk of simply shutting down. Sensay can help capture the operating knowledge of those founders and operators to make it possible to transition those businesses to new owners. That's an enormous economic opportunity and, frankly, a meaningful contribution to keeping good businesses alive. I also want to be straight with you about something. Completion rates on knowledge transfer have been one of the harder problems that we faced. People sometimes lack the incentives to complete the interviews and often are so used to switching off when they've handed in the notice or been fired that they don't want to contribute. If you're leaving a job, sitting down to do a thorough handover isn't always at the top of your list. And we felt that. So we've been actively investing in solving it. We're building new incentive mechanisms, some financial and some gamified, some recognition-based, to properly reward people for sharing what they know. And this is where the Sensay token comes in directly. One of the models we're developing uses Sensay tokens as the incentive layer, with the company purchasing tokens from the market to fund those rewards. That creates a direct structural link between the platform usage and the token demand. The more knowledge transfers we power, the more tokens flow through the market, and more to sort of come out on this soon as we develop it further. On growth, we've had several partnership conversations underway, focused on distribution and customer acquisition. I'm not naming names yet because nothing's signed, but these are the kind of partners that can put Sensay in front of tens of thousands of enterprise HR teams. And we'll be publishing an updated roadmap in the coming weeks so you can see exactly where we're heading and hold us to it. Which brings me to our ask for this month. We're actively looking to have conversations with HR managers, operations managers, and people leaders in North America and the UK. If you know an HR director, a chief people officer, a head of talent, a chief operating officer, anyone in that world, and you can make a warm introduction, we want to talk to them. And as a thank you, we'll reward some valid introductions with Sensay tokens. One warm intro to the right person can move the needle enormously for us, and this is how the community can actually get involved in advancing the business. So let me close with this. Picture the world we're building towards, a world where no business dies because the founder retires with no successor, a world where no team loses a decade of experience the day someone hands in their notice, a world where parents go on maternity leave, don't return to chaos, and where the AI systems coming into our workplaces inherit human wisdom rather than replacing it. That's the world we're trying to build here at Sensay. And we're still very, very early, properly early, to a category that's about to become a major part of the enterprise software stack. Thank you all for being a part of this. Thank you all for the energy, for the support, the introductions, the questions, and the conviction. We've got serious work ahead, but we've got serious momentum starting to ramp up behind us. So let's keep building. All right, I'm going to stop talking there and start opening up to some questions. So please do have, I believe we've got some questions shared on both Twitter and YouTube. So I'm going to start bringing up some of these questions to answer. So let's start with, his name is Daniel. Great name. The question is, what inspired the team to build Sensay in the first place, and what gap in the market were we trying to solve? So this is obviously a bit more of a fun story because we've been going for quite some time now. And the original story from Sensay, basically for anyone who's kind of new to this and hasn't, and I don't think we've talked about this in actually quite some time. Sensay originally came from what was 2 books that I'd written on the concept of digital immortality and mind uploading. And the whole idea came from when I was in between different cycles in my life. I just moved out of the UK and down to Spain, and I found myself really struggling with the transition from working 12, 15 hours a day in London to a much quieter pace of life in Spain, and searching for some kind of, ambition and meaning and reason for, working hard and building things. And it was an interesting time in my life. So I started, and I'd studied philosophy at university. So at the time I was starting to write out just little notes and thoughts to myself about our place in the universe, how we can find meaning, how different people throughout history have found meaning in what they do. And I ended up writing my first book, which is a very philosophical, search for the meaning of life in my own way. And, I looked at everything from the idea that, we have bloodlines, we have legacy, success, stories about us, how everyone from the ancient Egyptians to, some of the greatest authors of time and autobiographies that we read capture and preserve the stories of people that we know and love, and pass that on for generations to come. How some people built mega temples and preserve the stories inside. So for me, the idea really comes from that. It comes from the ability to capture and preserve yourself in some form for the future. And the conclusion that I came to in the first novel was this idea of, we are the first generation in history to actually have access to all of this data about ourselves, photos, videos, files, messages like emails, texts, whatever we have. And we're the first generation to have more of that than we need really. And even 10 years ago, I could see the emergence of AI coming to the level it's at. And the idea was really that we could combine these digital footprints of ourselves with sufficiently advanced AI. And that combination of AI with our personal data can actually create almost like a digital version of ourselves that can live on either alongside us in the world we live in, or in some kind of virtual reality in a very Black Mirror-esque way. And I think with we're about to see the first real example of what a true virtual world will be with GTA 6, the game coming out soon. And so I think that there's genuinely an opportunity for versions of ourselves to almost inhabit these worlds. So imagine you take this digital replica of yourself that's trained on your messages, it's trained on your image, your style, your voice, and you could play that, and you could actually interact with those characters inside of a game like GTA 6, for example. And I think that's only going to get more advanced over the next 5-10 years. So I think the first book was really around that, and that inspired the earliest. Sorry, I know I've gone off on a massive tangent here, and I apologize for anyone who isn't used to me doing that. The way that ties into what we're building at Sensay really meant that we were looking at starting to build these digital replicas of people, and that would capture everything about them, their stories, their photos, their videos, and create a digital clone of them that could interact with their kids, their grandkids, their great grandkids. And that was where Sensay really started. So we started looking at that, and that opened up a huge Pandora's box, can of worms of essentially just so many options of things we could do with that technology. Everything from education to interactive historical monuments to healthcare to gaming. Literally, the sky's the limit. Any industry, marketing, anything that we do online could be done by your digital replica. And so we started looking at different industries we could focus on for a while. We looked at education, we looked at healthcare, and then we looked at business use cases. And what we ended up settling on really was this idea of capturing and creating digital replicas of key people in businesses, right? So you look at capturing like one for myself. And we had Danbot for a while where you could interact with a digital clone of me. The problem with this was twofold. We had, on the one hand, the demand wasn't as there as we thought it would be. Partly because people don't like the idea of having a digital version of themselves that stays in the business after you're gone. Let alone something that talks like you, sounds like you, looks like you, and could even act like you. Some people love the idea, but it's a super niche market. And the other thing is, even if they are okay with the idea of that, what it actually takes to train a digital replica of yourself was a bit too much for some people. So when it comes to training, a really good quality replica of yourself, you need to connect, all of you, a lot of your personal messages and emails to it as well. And that was probably a bit too far for a lot of people. And so the whole, didn't quite work out. What we did realize is that the need was still there. We knew this understanding of business continuity was an issue at some point. And I think it clicked probably last August, when we realized that actually, there is a way of solving that problem without having to, run into some of those key blockers. And that really was where we ended up with today. So we ended up focusing really on the knowledge, specifically to capture and pass on key knowledge for different roles and different individuals. And that's how we got to where we are today. And yeah, so thank you for the question. That's that basically is my book that inspired Sensay to be built in the first place. And we've had to pivot and change a couple of times as along the way, which were not easy decisions to make. But along the way, we've really identified that this is a big problem, and with the technology and the team that we have, that we can actually do a great job in working towards that. So thank you for the question. And I see you've actually sent me, there's a couple of other questions here, so I will answer those as well. So thank you to his name is Daniel, because he sent quite a few questions. Right, so how would you explain Sensay to someone who has never interacted with Web3 before? So for someone who's never interacted with Web3, we would probably just explain it as we have. The idea of taking someone's experience and tacit knowledge, capturing that through AI interviews and advanced RAG systems, so advanced AI systems where you can drop any of your files and data into, and our system will process them in a natural way as a human would. So what you do is you basically capture that knowledge and experience from the files you have, but then there's lots of people who are out there, like the elderly generation, who still type one finger at a time. So what you actually get with that is they're not very good at creating handover and passing on that knowledge. So we created an AI voice-to-voice system that can interact with them, called Sophia, as builds a very friendly interviewer that adapts to you as an individual. So instead of an HR manager interviewing you and doesn't know anything about your job, Sophia already has the context of your company, what you do for the company, who you work for, who works for you, as well as some of the data and files you've already uploaded as context. What she then has is an interview script, so interview questions that are personalized to you, that also dynamically evolve during the interview. So if there's missing points of information, then she'll actually dig into those points to really get into the nitty-gritty of what you do in your job. And that helps to either train someone behind who's coming in to replace you, take over from you, pick up your work if you're changing projects, or to help train an AI that's coming in to learn about that particular role. So it's a lot of basically it's a lot of proprietary data coming from that tacit knowledge that isn't in your files, it's not online, and it's definitely not in the LLMs already. So that's how we describe it. So it is predominantly a Web2 business with a Web3 infrastructure underneath. So thank you for that. And one more from his name is Daniel. So thank you for these questions; they're very good. What do you think? What do you think is currently the biggest misconception people have about the project? I wouldn't say there's a particularly large misconception. I think our team's very good at clearly communicating what we do. I think that the biggest question we get from potential customers is usually around incentives. How do we incentivize someone to actually go through the process, actually hand over the knowledge? And so with that, we actually, we know that what we have is better than nothing, right? There was nothing before. But what we actually do is we solve the main issues around the reasons people don't like doing handovers. So people don't like doing handovers usually because it's time consuming, because they've already switched off, because they're moving on to the next job. Maybe they think their knowledge is their IP and they want to save that. But there's no real incentive structure, or I guess punishment structure for not doing it. So you could look at it from the incentive side, which could be you could get an extra week of pay if you complete the knowledge transfer. You could look at it, or some kind of gift or whatever it might be. You could look at it from the opposite, which might be a bit more of a stick attitude, where it's in your contract with your company to complete it. But generally, we realize we don't even need that as an incentive. The big thing that people don't like to do is they don't like to go through the process. They've already switched off. They decide that they're leaving, or they've been fired. There's no, but for the most part, people are good leavers. For the most part, people are, happy to help and pass on their knowledge. Especially retirees, for example, they're very happy to pass on their knowledge to the next generations. So the problem really comes is the ease of how they do that. Now, if they're just collecting their files and putting it in a folder, no one's going to read it. If they write a big long handover document, no one's going to read it. And they don't like doing exit interviews and neither do the HR managers really, because exit interviews are usually, just more around top level, are you going to sue the company? So not really any knowledge capture there either. So we make it super easy and actually solve most of that by having a simple system where you can just dump all the data into and have this like friendly interview that's actually someone like Sophia is then trained to be someone who has your job rather than someone who doesn't. So it already makes it a lot nicer experience, and we're seeing a decent uptick from that. So that's the main misconception and main issue we have. All right, so I guess someone's quick thing. Termination mechanism needs to be updated. I mean, that's why we're here, right? That's the problem. There's a big issue around offboarding and knowledge transfer as a whole, and we're seeing that from the companies, responses we get from different companies. So that's why we're working on this as a problem. What's the new goal, and when will the new clear roadmap for this quarter be updated? So yeah, the roadmap definitely needs to be updated. We will come out in the next few weeks with an updated roadmap, which should dictate the rest of the year and give some predictions into the next year as well. As we see around, there's a lot of confusion around the current market conditions, both in Web 2 and Web 3. And even just the general financial markets. Like, it's a very strange time with a very strange situation going on that doesn't seem to be acting in any kind of like reasonable way. So it's very confusing for a lot of people to sort of kind of guess what's going to come up. And we will do our best, as the same as everyone. So, with that, we're trying to do our best to sort of predict what will happen, and therefore that will affect, what we look out for the roadmap for the future. Why are you guys only listed on MEXC, and what did you guys do this month? Okay, so MEXC was the only exchange we listed on at the start, just because it was what we started off with, and ever since then we've been open to better, other exchanges in the top 10 list on CoinMarketCap. But I think I had this conversation in the Telegram group this week. Around the issues between listing fees sometimes seem like a huge waste of money when they don't really have the same effect as they had back in 2021 or before, right? Back then, if you're listing on exchange, you would immediately pump to a crazy high level. That hasn't really been the case in quite some time. In fact, you actually end up worse off, not only because the treasury has to pay over a huge listing fee, often in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but also the amount of tokens you actually have to give over to the exchange for them to give to their community often negates any amount of gains you might get. That said, we are aware that some people would prefer other exchanges. And so, we stay open to those opportunities. We have regular catch-ups with various exchanges to give them progress. But right now we're focusing on really building the business into a profitable, sustainable business that can then start buying back up the tokens itself to essentially, kickstart the token market and volume. What do we do this month? Loads of stuff. We had the Web Summit Vancouver conference, so it's a big technology conference. But also, like I said, the dev team have been fixing loads of bugs and making everything a lot better and smoother. And we've been working on some of these other problems we've learned from our pilot partners to build a better product for the future. His name is Daniel, is coming back with some more questions. Fantastic. What's been the most difficult challenge since launching the project? Many. I wouldn't say there's one particular most challenging. We've been through the same as pretty much all startups. There's different times where you have cash flow issues, founder issues, where there's times where you have to make that decision to pivot away from something you thought was going to be the right way to a better, or there's always that challenge of you work towards something, but at some point if it's not working out, having to move, either having to stick to your guns and say this is what we have to do, or make a well thought out decision to change. And I think we've been through our fair share of all of those. So constant challenges. All right, and we actually have a few questions that came through on the Telegram group, so I'm just going to go through a couple of those, if that's all right. So let's have a look. Right, and there was 1 second. Let me just find the first one. So from Tomasz, question: how many clients use Sensei token to pay for the plan? That is a great question that I don't have the reason. I think it's not many. It's probably around about 10% use a token to pay. They get a discount if they use tokens, but it's not because a lot of our clients are Web2 enterprise businesses that will drive profitability and sustainability, and then from the profits we can then start buying back tokens. So that's the way the kind of like flywheel kicks off. And I'm sure in the future more will start using it to pay for the plan, but it's not. We realize that it's probably not going to be the main driver. The main driver will be when we have this incentive mechanism where the companies can buy up tokens from us or from the market and then use that to incentivize the employees who may be global, and that's where crypto comes in a great way, in a way to reward them for participating. So there's going to be a net gain on that because they'll be buying up tokens in bulk for that. So thanks for the question, Tomasz. Next question is from Max Bidding. Are there new plans for token utility? If yes, which ones? So this is what we're talking about with the incentive mechanism. This is still a work in progress. We're still working through it with some of the pilot partners to see how it can work best, and when that is all done, we should actually have a really simple system that can use it in that way. Beyond that, we haven't really looked at anything new right now because we're still working on that one. We are looking at different networks. So there is a particularly exciting network that we're looking to deploy on, but it's just taking a bit more time than we anticipated. And so the follow-up question: is there a new or original extra pathway Sensei could take to catch mass popularity in the crypto space, like, for example, virtuals back in 2024 with the AI agent platform? We're always open to different ideas that anyone might have towards like how we can jump on a particular narrative and hype. But from what I can see in the space, I mean, going to any crypto conference in the last year has shown that it's really a much more like quiet time in the space. I don't know if you guys feel the same, but it's definitely, sorry, lots of beeping outside. It definitely feels like it's a quiet time, and this usually comes because it's like at the bottom part of a cycle. There's no real narratives emerging right now. There's no like big hype. There's no like big projects, and this is partly due to the way that the meme coins and casino and shit coins have basically affected the market. So people are like chasing after 10, 20,000 instead of like 10, 20 million in market caps. And I think that there's a big shift in how it's acting, but most of it just comes because of the uncertainty in the market overall. Macros don't look great. At the same time, the S&P 500 is at the all-time highs. You got the Iran war and the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, which should be affecting lots of prices all around the world, from oil to fertilizer to food to minerals to so many different things. And yet we're seeing all-time highs in everything apart from cryptos. So it's an interesting time in the market, and because of that, I think a lot of crypto people have shifted their money into AI projects. But it's only because there's not that many new narratives or new projects that we can see that of any real quality coming out in the crypto space. There are a few outliers, obviously things like BitTensor as a decentralized AI network, and some that are playing on the AI network, as well as privacy coins, stablecoin. There's a lot of investment going in stablecoins and stablecoin infrastructure. So there are a few small sectors, but it hasn't got the same kind of retail hype that usually drives markets, especially for altcoins. So in terms of like building new pathways to capture the popularity, I genuinely think that the same as I've said for the last year or so, that by building a sustainable business, by building a profitable business, and using the profits to reward the community and enable them to get involved by enabling buybacks because of the profit, is the best way to essentially drive up token volume, attention, because once you have that solid business metric, you end up seeing a genuine, consistent growth. All right, and a couple last questions. Why do people talk about their knowledge and skills when they're leaving? Will they be paid for that? For example, I don't want to share my experience. That would make me less valuable. So this is from Holdwolf. Yeah. So this is, this is, like I said, this is one of the biggest objections that we get to the technology. Why would you do that, right? What your value and your own experience is what makes you valuable to yourself and a company. And there's a few different ways of incentivizing this. Again, it can be the carrot or the stick. You could be rewarded for sharing it. It could be part of your contract that you have to share it on the negative. But also, generally people like to, share and pass on their knowledge. Obviously there's a lot of experience and know-how that goes with that. And we're not going to we're a long way off from capturing all of that. There's, out of everything, if I were to leave, is that out of everything I know, would I be able to get that all down into interviews or handovers? I think that's a real challenge, and we're working towards that. But in terms of being able to, pass on like what someone would need, like if I'm working in a random job and I'm proud of where I work and I want to be helpful to the company, maybe you've been there for a few years, or maybe you've up to a decade or more. You really do want to be able to pass that on so the next person coming through can, maybe don't want it to replace you with AI for sure, but it can definitely be used to help the next person coming in to keep the business momentum. Because when someone new coming into a role, it typically takes them 6 to 18 months to ramp up to get the business back up to full speed after someone senior leaves. So having that massive gap and that massive cost to the company is, they can easily incentivize it enough for you as an individual to get rewarded for completing this. Because most people will do a handover or help to train up someone who's coming in to shadow them or replace them. All we do is we make that easier with a bit of technology. So thank you for the question. And I guess one last one from, his name is Daniel. So what separates Sensay from projects that are mainly driven by hype cycles? So we launched in an AI hype cycle ourselves, and I think that the difference between us and them is that we're still going. You look at any of the projects that launched their token around the same time as us. Most of them don't exist anymore. The teams have abandoned them. They've gone quiet or cold. They're moving on something else. Whereas we're still here. We're still building. We're addressing real problems, real solutions, and with real customers. So there's, I think there's a real difference there. That's between what we do and what some of these other projects do. And even now, like you see a lot of projects still like launching again at those like tiny levels, just very quickly they come in and out. But even at some of the larger projects that have launched in the last 2 years, they just have zero volume, and their crazy FDVs, their fully diluted valuations are insanely high because they manipulate the price by launching only a small amount of their tokens or restricting people to buy or sell. And even some of the most famous ones right now, like look at World Liberty Financial. It's people are so tired of being scammed out by these different projects, and so that will never be us. We do everything fairly. We're always in our different social media. We're happy to answer any question anyone has anytime, and I'll do these calls whenever we get enough people asking for them. So look, I think that's what separates us. We're genuinely here to try and build and learn and grow, and we do our best with that. So thank you for the questions today. So I think that is most of the questions we have for today. Unless there's anything else, these are all a bit commenty. No. Well, guys, look, if there's no other questions coming through, we just got one in. From Joshua. How will the workplace dynamic change when new hires spend their first month conversing with AI version of their predecessor rather than human mentor? That's a great question. So, yeah, on the one hand, we've talked a lot about people leaving and retiring, right? We talk a lot about people who are of an older generation who have a lot of experience and knowledge. And the other side of that conversation is obviously the person coming in to replace them. Now, when we start to look at what that looks like, Generally speaking, it's someone younger, maybe millennial, maybe Gen Z. In this more modern workforce, people aren't staying in jobs as long as they used to. So someone who used to work in a job for a decade or longer is being replaced by someone who works in a job for 1, 2, maybe 5 years at a stretch. So when they're coming in to actually work in this new role, the typical, like all other HR tech, focuses on recruitment, onboarding, training, benefits, management. None of them look at end of life, right? So that's where we have a real gap to fill. But in terms of how that new person coming in to pick up from that previous company, I don't think they have to learn exclusively from the AI that we build, right? It's not like, because there are already learning platforms out there and training platforms and onboarding systems that help with a lot of this. I think where our system really fits in is either by tying into those learning platforms and onboarding systems, but also not, it's not about, because the new person coming in is going to have their own ideas. They're going to have their own way of doing things. So it's not always about just doing things the way they were done before and learning exactly how to do it. It's more about taking that new person coming in with new ideas, new ways of doing things, but also if they get stuck, if they can't find a particular file or a reference to a customer or a project, or they need additional help, instead of having to search through all the files, which takes time, sometimes there's a huge amount of cost in searching through old data, especially if it's someone who used to work in a company that isn't there anymore. So there's no coherent filing system. Maybe they're very good at noting things down, but that's the whole point of capturing tacit knowledge, because there's a lot of things you don't have in your files. And having this AI that you can query when you have certain questions around some of that previous work, the previous files, previous projects, or previous teams or systems, having something you can just quickly ask instead of having to go looking for the information, I think is where the real value of what we offer is. And so not only it's not there to exclusively train them up on their new job, but it's definitely an addition. And with our new generation of employees coming into certain job roles and replacing these older generations, we are not necessarily, the big royal we, millennials and Gen Z and everyone from that age onwards, Gen Alpha, are going to be essentially so used to interacting with AI now in a conversational way that actually, you'll see, instead of a new employee wanting to ask their boss or ask the CEO, like, oh, where, the previous guy was here, where's this file, or what's this? If they can just ask an AI very quickly rather than actually having to ask a human, I think they will. And so that's where it just helps speed things up. It saves time both sides, and I don't think it changes the workplace dynamic. I think it just makes it more efficient. I mean, AI is here to make things more efficient overall, and I think this is just another tool that helps to solve a particular problem of knowledge gap and on-ramping, and this whole cost around knowledge searching. And I think that's how it shifts it and helps to actually improve helps to overall improve that sort of massive cost that's almost like a hidden cost to companies and their enterprises. And so that's what we're here to do. And we're working towards offering as much value to our customers as possible when it comes to that. So thank you for the question. Guys, that looks like it's all the questions for today. I just want to say thank you all for joining us and listening in, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching the recording. Thank you for taking time out of your Friday to listen to me ramble for 45 minutes. As always, if you have any other questions, you can always tag us at Ask Sensay on any social media, and we will see it and respond, or join our Telegram group, which again is at our Sensay. Find our website, sensay.io, and take trusted and genuine links from there, and you will any of our team will be able to respond to different questions you might have. But thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you have a great weekend. Bye.
In the next few years, millions of experienced employees will leave the workforce. When they go, their knowledge, the stories, the systems, the silent genius goes with them. And today's hires want more than a handbook. They want mentorship on demand, but can't find it. Meet Sensay. Sensay preserves your most valuable asset, your people's expertise, by creating intelligent, always available knowledge bases built from how they think, speak, and solve problems. Sensay captures their expertise and turns it into a living, searchable source of wisdom. More than knowledge capture, this is wisdom on demand. Sensay gives your organization something it's never had before. Scalable, personalized wisdom, available 24/7. Sensay answers the repeat questions and shares what used to be locked in people's heads, so your team can get back to what they do best: leading, building, creating. Sensay's the smartest investment you can make in your business. Build